It's the Jim and Terry Show coming to you from the Hobbit Hole studio in downtown Bobcaygeon. What used to be the Wyerton Willie early end of winter seems to have slipped into maybe Wyerton Willie got it wrong on Groundhog Day. A little white stuff, cold temperatures from plus 15 to 0, -5? What? A relapse, Wyerton Willie. I don't know what your prognostication was, but it doesn't seem to be holding. I hope you are right. Spring will be here. It just doesn't look like it or feel like it. COVID vaccines, anti-vax, science, fake science, pseudoscience. How do you sort it all out? Science communication seems to be a tough thing. Who do you believe? Who are your reliable sources? Well, here's one from me. I bought the book by Dr. Peter Hotez called The Rise of Anti-Science, and it tries to connect the dots and does so in a great, easy read. And I have alluded to the book from time to time, but I'm not going to do a book review of it at the moment. Instead, I'm going to play a snippet from a little excerpt from, I don't know, I like the word snippet though. I don't know what's wrong with that, but I'm going to use it. A little brief excerpt from Debunk the Funk, Dr. Wilson, one that I would consider a reliable science communicator. What does he say about the cases of diseases that we thought we had eradicated on the rise, appearing out of nowhere, things that we didn't have to worry about because we were safely vaccinated? What is the impact of the anti-vax movement that ran amok during COVID-19 and still lurks? What is it doing to the wellness of public health practices everywhere? Debunk the funk.
Well, you saw the title of this video. And I know, I'm sorry I'm making another short video about him like this, but he just keeps saying things that are remarkably stupid. You see, Joe is following and getting his information about vaccines from anti-vaxxers like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. or Robert Malone or John Campbell. He just listens to what they say, doesn't actually read any sources himself, and then spews his opinion to his tens of millions of listeners. And now he's running his show like it's 2005, and the idea that vaccines cause autism is all the rage again.
But this is the crazy one. Prenatal exposure to COVID-19 mRNA vaccine induces autism-like behaviors in male neonatal rats.
So in that clip, he's just talking about this paper, which I'm sure he just read the title of and listened to what some of the weirdos sharing it said. And he didn't actually read it. So what this paper did is it took a small number of rats and gave one group a placebo and one group a COVID mRNA vaccine. And mind you, this dose of COVID mRNA vaccine is equivalent to a human getting 360 vaccine doses at once. So how is that going to tell us anything about how this works in humans? So after they give rats this relatively huge dose of COVID vaccine, they subject the offspring of these rats to these behavioral tests that are supposed to give them an insight into whether or not the rats are exhibiting autistic behavior. Look, mice and rats can be really good models of human biology, but it takes a lot of work to establish that they are a good model for whatever you're studying. Which is why so many times the news will report on a particular study that is done in mice or rats, and scientists will have to scream from the rooftops, "You are not a mouse or a rat." These results are in mice and rats. They don't necessarily apply to you. So I didn't know much about animal models of autism, but there is no rat model of autism in this paper. Now, I can't speak to the validity of this, but all I can say is that there are some that are said to be able to be used as a model of autism. These are rats that have genes specifically knocked out of them. But this paper doesn't use any of them. They just use adult Wistar rats. And as far as I can tell in the literature, there is no data saying that these are a valid model for autism. So the setup is wrong, the model is wrong, and the results are meaningless. Beyond the behavioral test, they just test for specific immune molecules, but the immune molecule profile of rats versus humans is very different. Basically, rats tolerate immune insults very differently than humans, and thus the immune molecule profile you'll get out of an immune response can't really be translated to humans, at least not without a whole bunch of study for whatever topic you're studying. But despite all of these limitations and all of these nonsense methods, Joe Rogan says to his tens of millions of followers that pregnant women shouldn't get vaccinated because autism.
And how many women did they tell to get vaccinated while they were pregnant? How many women? They didn't have data on whether or not it was safe. They just didn't. They didn't. They didn't have tests. They'll admit they didn't have it.
I mean, just shame on you, Joe. Being pregnant is an immune compromised state. You are more vulnerable to infectious diseases while you are pregnant. Thus, your unborn child is more vulnerable to infectious diseases. So, vaccination during pregnancy not only protects the mother and the unborn child, but it also allows the mother to pass some immunity onto their child that protects them during their first months of life, where they are very vulnerable to infectious diseases like COVID. Most of the children under the age of 18 who have died of COVID in America were under 6 months of age. But screw it, some anti-vax politician who's running for president told Joe Rogan something else, so he's going to believe it because he can't think for himself. Anyway, that's it. Joe Rogan's dumb. Please don't get your medical or scientific information from him. Ever.
Well, there you go. A little snippet, a little excerpt from Debunk the Funk, Dr. Wilson, who is a science communicator and wasn't always, but decided he couldn't take the amount of fake pseudo news from people who did not understand the data. So here I am saying I'm not a scientist, but I do assess and discern sources, and that's part of my training and part of my methodology. Reliable Sources was a program on CNN. Brian Stelter was the host, and he had a particular book out that I did pick up, which was Debunking Fox News as a Legitimate Source or Purveyor of Anything that is Credible or Reliable in terms of political neutrality. Anything that was spurious seemed to find its way to Fox. Anything that was biased towards the GOP, the Republican Party, Trump, always seemed to find its way to headlines and chyrons on Fox. So how's that billion-dollar lawsuit working for Fox? Well, Tucker Carlson's gone, found his new platform with, did Joe Rogan host him or did Elon Musk host him on X? I'm not sure where Carlson ended up. But the point is that pseudoscience has a way of working through the media, working through not just mainstream media, but working its way through alternative media, through social media, through your TikToks, through your Facebook feeds, through all of these things that are not vetted necessarily unless you're getting your feeds from a news agency. Anybody can say anything, you can post anything, you can have an opinion about anything. Not all opinions are validated or substantiated by either legitimate research or data. Stick with the data. Data is science. Data is provable. And when you can use evidence to support your opinion, you're on more firm ground than if you just click, repeat, like videos and shorts. So do some research yourself, explore topics, or in my case, buy books, which is what I do, and read them, bookmark them, underline them, highlight them, write down questions you have as you read from sources. Is this person reliable? How do I know? Can I check that footnote? Can I check that source? And if you can, then do some checking just to say to yourself, yeah, I did check that source and it seemed to be reliable. And then you'll develop your own set of reliable sources or ones that you have found to be credible. Joe Rogan, not credible. Interesting social media, covers a lot of stuff that is of interest, conspiracy theories, aliens. But in terms of conveying science, maybe not so much. Stick to your entertainment value. Don't go dabbling into stuff whereof you do not know and do not have evidence of. And certainly, in terms of vaccines, do not trust Robert F. Kennedy Jr. His whole family has denounced him and are all voting for Biden. I'm not telling you how to vote. I'm telling you to vote. In Canada, please, you got to get off your seat and vote. The only way we change systems is not by not parking 18-wheelers along Spark Street in downtown Ottawa, and not by threatening the existing government and not by having demands for an overall change of government. We do that with elections. Anything short of elections is coup. And when you have a coup d'etat, you are talking about January 6th, you are talking about third world countries, you're talking about military regimes overthrowing legitimate elections. Seldom have I read where a military intervenes in an electoral process and anything good comes. It's usually a general, Idi Amin, who takes charge in Uganda and doesn't let go. They say they're just there for a little while. Trump has promised he'll just be a dictator for a day. Things will get back to normal. Trust the systems. No, don't. Vote. Make sure you get out and vote. And that's the message. How to change things? Vote. I was going to go on to talk about Canadian politics as a trailer to this. The anti-vax movement is still alive and well in Canada. I encounter it in my local area. There are people that I know who still, to this day, repeat fake news on COVID vaccines, fake news, fake studies, pseudoscience bafflegab from holistic naturopathic remedies. Remember, you are not a horse. You are not a cow. Don't take ivermectin. That's still going around. People are still saying they can inject themselves despite all the studies that show. And remember, I said, just because you find contrary information doesn't mean you're necessarily wrong, but it does mean you're an outlier. Outlier means on the fringe. And whether that fringe is trucker convoy in Ottawa or that fringe is the Trump MAGA world people, you're on the fringe. And it behooves you to make sure you understand that position. Doesn't mean you're wrong, so you got to do some further investigation. Just be aware. That's all. Joe Rogan, apparently blissfully unaware because, well, money talks and money walks, and money buys Joe Rogan all kinds of stuff, including some pretty high-profile guests who want to be on the Joe Rogan show. Why? Well, it could be millions of listeners, millions of viewers. Monetization. Capitalism works a wonder when you're spreading hoodoo, and snake oil salesmen tend to find their way onto the internet. Be aware. Search it out for yourself. Find good science communicators, reliable sources. It's up to you to choose your sources and choose who and what to believe. The Jim and Terry Show. A little debunk the funk from Dr. Wilson. Bye-bye for now.